So the point, so the point is that there's always more to learn. So it's never going to end. It hasn't ended for me. I've been doing it for 40 years now. So it's always fun. So this is be the bird owner, bird breeder, or veterinarian. This talk I've given to a couple of different groups, both veterinary and breeders, so aviculturists as well. So it is kind of important to know these things. All right. So you guys might be here with this thought in mind. Gosh, this could be interesting. So, which is okay. I appreciate you giving me both your time and an opportunity for me to see if I can get you guys entertained here. Excuse me. So this picture is to remind us that the birds that we see, and we're going to talk primarily about citizens today, but the birds that we see these are not too far removed from being wild birds. These guys have not been in captivity that long. This is the clay licks down in South America, Tepipala. Hold on one second. There you go. So this bird, let me do something real quick. Here we go. So this bird, its grandparents or its parents theoretically could still be in the wild or could have been in the wild. And so, bear with me. So domestication is different than taming. So domestication is the animals are genetically different. So they're altered to live alongside human beings. So the theory is it takes 10 to 14 generations, which certainly we've had that many generations of parakeets, but some say it takes 50 generations. So when you look at these hyacinths, there's not been enough time in the recent past to be 50 generations. These guys live 50, 60 years, but they breed at 15 years or so. So you can do the math. So we can tame them, but it's different than domesticated. So you have to keep that in mind as you work on these species. One more little look. So that's how the birds see the world. So remember, what we see when we're looking at them, they don't see. They see the world differently. We'll talk more about that during this discussion, but they see things differently. So birds can be kind of the most demanding pets. So if those of you who have birds, you probably know that. If you've been around owners that have birds, there's a lot to them. They can be expensive, especially the larger ones. They're messy. They can be loud. They chew on stuff. They don't always learn to talk, which not every owner has that figured out. They live a long time. But you know what? They're the most amazing pets ever in the right home. So get the right bird in the right home. They are absolutely amazing. So as you work on these guys, realize all the downsides, but the upside is they are truly amazing little critters. So poor diet and husbandry are the #1 cause of disease in our avian species. And this has been true as long as I've been in practice and long before I was in practice. You hear that little beep, that's my computer thinking it wants to do something different. So the #1 cause for diet in days gone past, they would come in, almost all of them eating only seed. Fortunately, we've come a long way. Not all of them come in eating seed only, but we prefer they be on a pelleted or extruded diet. That's going to be much better balance. We'll talk more about seeds and their issues as well. But they can have some veggies, a little bit of fruit, a little bit of table food as nuts and treats, and training, fresh water. Things we like to avoid: alcohol, chocolate, avocados, caffeine, high salt and sugar, and fried foods. In fairness, it has caffeine on that list, and I've left it on there. I have clients that have coffee with their birds every day. And so, is it wise? Do I tell them not to do it? It's not wise. I tell them not to do that. And yet they every morning will have a coffee with their birds. And in fairness, to me, their birds look like they're doing just fine. But those are our recommendations. And as veterinarians, I know you guys, my understanding is you guys are all vet students in some shape, form, or fashion. So you might also be veterinarians, but that's kind of the when you have your talk with your clients in the exam room, this is all part of it. Nutrition. So nutrition itself it's almost an hour talk. So this whole talk is about an hour. So a complete discussion, it's kind of past what we can do on this particular presentation. I know you guys know Harrison Bird Diet does sponsor this. they're still my favorite. So they're not my favorite because they sponsor it. They're my favorite because I like their foods. And nutrition is critical. So pelletized or extruded diets should be the vast majority, if not all, the diets on these guys. A lot of times we feed other things for either enrichment or for foraging, but ultimately these birds do way better when they're on a diet that's been produced for them. Examples of how pseudocene diet can vary in the wild. So that's just a quick chart. You know, if you look at military macaws versus the budgie and the hyacinth and the greenwing, so the species are on the right, and look what they eat in the middle, right? So seed, fruits, nuts, bark, grain, seeds, fruits, flowers, nuts, seeds. So, and down, of course, our nectivores, they eat just pollens and nectars. But it's hard to get a perfect diet for these guys, but recognize that they all have different requirements. And so our goal as veterinarians teaching our clients is to help them get their birds on a better plate of nutrition. So when I say improper diet, the most common thing we see, birds that come in on seed only. So it's not like it doesn't still happen. Fortunately, we see a lot more birds now that are on better diets, but we still see plenty that come in. And the presenting diet is, oh, I feed them the good black sunflower seeds. And, you know, there is no good sunflower seed. I don't care if it's dark, if it's light. Sunflower seeds, sometimes we use them as training tools, but they certainly should not be the mainstay of their diet. So with these seed-only diets, we have hypocalcemia. You guys, I think, are all on computers, and so you should be able to see these nice little folding fractures on the wings of this bird. This bird is just a total disaster anyway. So this little outline here, that's supposed to be much more narrow. That's called hepatic silhouette. It's not only liver, but that's a lecture for a different day. But this bird is just a disaster. So we have metabolic bone disease when they're on all seed diet. So metabolic bone disease, you can kind of think a little bit like reptiles, if you guys have any reptile skills or knowledge. Hypovitaminosis A, probably the number one thing we see on our birds that are on all seed diets. So C is deficient in vitamin A, in protein, in calcium, and phosphorus. And hypovitaminosis A, it's one of those vitamin deficiencies that you oftentimes can see clinical presentation. You'll see a change in the oral cavity most commonly up around the choana, which is a little slit in the roof of the mouth. Sometimes you'll see moisture. Oftentimes you'll see white plaques or white film. You'll oftentimes see blunting of the fimbriae, which are the little finger-like processes that point towards the center of the choana. But it's huge. And so oftentimes when I see these guys, I'll give them a vitamin A injection once, but then it's all diet. So beta carotenes, right, which you see in some of your veggies, your pelletized, your extruded foods will have vitamin A, but oftentimes we have to supplement to get them back on track. So it causes squamous metaplasia, which is what you'll see commonly in the mouth, is what it causes it to be less healthy. You also see squamous metaplasia in the kidneys, and you'll start having renal tubule issues as well. Respiratory disease, reproductive disease, kidney, it's its own collection of mess. It's kind of fun to watch, though, these birds that come on with all seed diets. I always have owners take pictures, and then over time, usually a year is what it takes, take pictures again, and you can see the changes in what these guys look like. It's incredible. Poor feather quality, very common. Usually it's color, feathers refract light versus not all feathers actually have pigment to them, but the refraction improves as well on them. All right, here's your first quiz. Good news, there's not a bunch. So I think there's some sort of giveaway. I don't know if this is a built-in one. So how much meat would the average person need to eat per day if they had the metabolism of a hummingbird? So you may not have noticed during this discussion that I answered this question, and that's because I did not. So apparently I'm going to give you maybe, 15 seconds. Put your number in. It might be prize and money, or maybe neither, but put your guess in the chat. I can't actually see chats right now. I see talking. There we go. All right.
It's like we got 400, 600, 50, 800, 30, 200.
Okay, we're ready for the answer, it sounds like. 285 pounds of meat. So whoever's closest, I guess, wins something. I don't know if it's closest but not over, but that's going to be for you to figure out. That'll be our host. We'll take care of that.
Someone put 285s.
Wow, perfect. 285 pounds. So think about that's for this little hummingbird probably weighs in at 15 grams. We have all these birds, all these different sizes. Their nutritional needs are quite variable. All right, let's move on to enclosures. So we have learned, especially the last 5 to 10 years, that not only is exercise important, but sunlight is important. So for those of you who have been around reptiles, for example, you're aware of it used to be called metabolic bone disease. Now it's nutritional secondary hyperparathyroidism, just because they wanted to have more words to describe the same thing. But we are seeing in our older birds, because we see way more geriatrics these days, we're seeing a lot more osteoporosis and a lot more osteopenia. And so in human medicine, which we see this condition also in more commonly in older females, but both genders can have it. The prescription is always, or the recommendation is exercise, sunlight, and calcium. And so our recommendation for our birds is exercise, which is a flight if you can, or exercise walking around or moving around, flying in the house. Sunlight, or another advantage on being AAV is you get you get handouts you can use with your clients. There's a handout on UVB light for birds on AAV. And then, so exercise, sunlight, and calcium. And calcium's usually adequate in our diets that are manufactured. So I don't typically supplement on top of a diet that's adequate. Certainly trying to put a supplement in water in birds is usually useless. So I don't ever do that. Sometimes I'll supplement with beta carotene. So there's a red palm fruit oil is a beta carotene for vitamin A. But we're looking for beta carotenes for vitamin A's. But hypocalcemia, sunlight, exercise. So osteoporosis, osteopenia, especially spinal compression, we're seeing it right in front of the synsacrum, which would be like, it's kind of like lumbar sacral. So synsacrum is that long piece of bone that if you're eating chickens, you see the kidneys are hanging up in there. That's the synsacrum. So right in front of that's where you see compression. We also see it up in the cervical spine. And then we use UVB light and not vitamin D3. Vitamin D3, so it's a fat soluble vitamin. There is a concern about over supplementing. So trying to give vitamin D3 in adequate, but not abundant or overabundant quantities for a bird is difficult. So it's easier to do UVB. Obviously, if you get extra D3, you're going to have metastatic calcium and just a whole collection of disaster side effects. So lighting, and actually I tell my clients, I'm in Texas, so they can go out twice a week for a couple hours and get adequate light for them. If they go out every day, great. But for Texas, once again, we don't want to get too hot. So we'll mist them and then take them outside and put them in shade. So they can get reflected sunlight, just like our reptiles, and get adequate D3 that way. Same reason that you guys can get sunburn on the beach with an umbrella over you. So cage size, you never can have too big a cage. So as large as possible. The minimum, which it's hard to think about that. So they have to have room to spread their wings in all directions without hitting the bars. I hate to keep birds in there all the time. So some people will have cages that are smaller, or enclosures that are smaller, but the birds spend all their time outside of the enclosure and they go in that for sleeping. Also remember bar spacing and strength appropriate for the species. So I've had clients that have cockatiel cages, they put Amazons in or cockatoos in, and of course the cockatoos dismantle everything. But got to think about that. So horizontal versus vertical bars versus bar spacing. Can they get their head through there or their leg through there? Can they get caught? Can they get in trouble? And then the strength of the bars needs to be appropriate. I've had some of the big hyacinths would put dents in faucets in their owners' houses. So these guys are super powerful with these beaks. Probably best to purchase your cages from a reputable retailer. So in the past, they had paints that were high in zinc. It's not as big a problem now since that's a known toxin, but it is an issue if someone's going to make them and try to paint them. Some people will get galvanized metal. So galvanized metal cages, the galvanization process is zinc. And probably the biggest challenge is when they have the galvanized metal that they dip in galvanization, it has little, it looks like little water droplets hanging off the bottom of the metal. And these birds think that's really cool to nibble off those little droplets, and then they eat them and they get zinc toxicosis. So ideally, of course, stainless steel doesn't have any paint on it, but the powder coated painted cages that are from a reputable retailer are by and far safe. Perches, excuse me, size and texture. So we don't want them touching their toes all the way around the perch, right? They typically don't want them flat. Of course, got to think about the species, but we're talking primarily parrots, talking primarily parrots now. So enough room. I usually do a variety of sizes. Just like if you were to stand on the same surface all the time, your feet get tired. So same with our birds. We try to give them a little bit of variety of sizes and variety of textures. So your clients will come in with sandpaper covered perches on everything, for especially the smaller birds. And that's usually it's a recipe for bumblefoot, for sore feet. So they make a concrete perch for our larger birds. I don't mind a concrete perch in there, but I wouldn't make it the only thing they stand on. And the value of perches, the ones that have texture, to me, is more, they smooth out the extra shelving on their beak more so than they dull their nails. Usually they sharpen their nails on it. So if someone says, oh, how can I keep my bird's nails short? I'm not going to tell them get a concrete perch because it just sharpens them. They do tend to keep their nails fairly well worn, but gosh, I have a whole crowd that come in for nail trims regularly because they're not, flying hundreds of miles or hanging around trees as much as they would in the wild. Changing the paper daily is ideal. So if you use a grate, you can cut out a stack of paper that's the same size as the bottom of the grate, and you can just roll a top sheet out each day. And so for the owners, the mission is you can see how many stools, how big they are, what color they are, if they're watery or not watery. So it gives you a snapshot of that bird's general status each day as you roll that top piece of paper off. The grate, of course, keeps them from dropping food down there and then going and foraging through stool and food at the same time. No corncob bedding. Corncob, the biggest challenge we have is it gets wet and it grows fungus. So we have aspergillus as an issue. So we don't need that. And then scrub the cages at least monthly. If you tell the client monthly, they'll do it every other month. So the goal is to have them scrub it monthly. So if you tell them every 2 weeks, they'll do it monthly. But the goal is at least monthly to really scrub it down. That can be a steamer. I typically have them just use soap and water. If they want to do a disinfectant, I'll have them, this is not the Clorox as a wipe, and then let it dry. But scrub it. It's really getting the organic matter off that makes the difference. Husbandry. Most parrots are from tropical damp environments and are designed for high humidity. So I didn't have this as a test question, but now I have a second. What's wrong with that word? What's wrong with that phrase in this picture? I'll give you guys 15 seconds to give me what that is. I'm going to have, Nikki, I'm going to have you tell me what they say. What's wrong with that sentence in this picture? I know it got really quiet, didn't it? It's always quiet here, though. All right.
It looks like we're hearing from a desert, aren't tropical, from arid environments.
Yeah. So kind of funny. I put this presentation together, and the first time I gave it, I had this sentence and this bird, and I went, really? So rather than take it out, I thought I'd leave it in. It's a talking point, right? Yeah, that little bird's, they're not tropical. So does that change some of my recommendations? It does a little bit. It's still, for most of our tropical birds, so we live in air-conditioned and heated environments. Oftentimes, if you bathe them or shower them a couple of times a week, it makes a big difference. Some people put water bowls in there sometimes like that. I don't like the trigger sprayers. So if you guys think about, if you take a trigger sprayer to your to one of your friends and you spray them in the face every day, they're going to hate you. So I tell people that because when they spray their bird, they say, well, he doesn't like me to bathe him. They make little pressurized, called personal misters if you go to amusement parks, but you pump them or pressurize them, and you push a button and it puts out a fine mist, and that fine mist will kind of come across those birds, and they tolerate that really well. But it helps keep the dander down, it helps keep them clean. So even my little desert birds, I will mist them every week or so for these little tiny guys, these and cockatiels. But our houses are usually pretty dry. The other thing is the owners have to learn the regular habits. So clients come in all stages of knowledge, but ultimately they need to know what their bird does every day. What are the regular habits? Does it talk? Where does it stay in its cage? When does it go to sleep? Because that'll alert them to medical problems. If something changes, they need to seek medical attention. This is what you might see. This is a disaster parakeet or a budgerigar, right? Remember that birds are prey animals. And so in captivity, they are going to look normal as long as possible. So if they look sick in captivity or in the wild, they get eaten. So what they'll do is they'll look normal, look normal, look normal, look normal. And the reason that people say birds are fragile is that they look normal until they're almost gone. They're actually very durable little critters. You just got to catch them before they reach the stage where they've waited until the last possible second to say, oh, I don't feel so good. But they're pretty durable, birds are. They have a very strong instinct to appear normal, right? As soon as they're fluff sitting at the bottom of the cage, crouch, eyes closed, those are all bad things. So that's so we have like a little folder that goes home with every bird client, and it goes through these things for them so they recognize, hey, I hadn't thought of that. Change the stool. I got less stool in there. Or we've had birds that come in that they don't change the food bowl because they think it's empty, but a bird has gone through. It's primarily when I see seeds, they've hulled all the seeds, and their bowl is full of seed holes, and they're starving. Almost always, they're sick longer than the owner is aware. I've had some clients that are very observant. So I had probably my most observant client. He had a bird that didn't eat its normal 7. It was Harrison Bird Diet's maintenance, lifetime maintenance, and it didn't eat its normal 7 little nuggets in the morning. He brought it in, and that bird actually had sarcocistis. It's a cockatoo, and he brought it in, and sure enough, it was sick, but only because he knew exactly what that bird ate. But that was what we call uber aware of his bird's normal behavior. And then it's nicer if you'll perform your physical exams in a quiet environment for these kids. All right, this could be a test question too. I had to show this picture because it's so cute. What kind of bird is this? Name that bird. This will be our last question probably. I don't think I have another one in here. That doesn't mean name it Betty. It means what kind of bird is it? There's going to be someone out there who says, I'm going to name that bird Betty. Yeah. All right, you only have 5 more seconds. We're going to move ahead. 4, 3, 2, 1. What do you got?
Looks like we have a lot of cockatoos.
His cockatoo wins. That's fair. Do we have any that say umbrella or Moluccan?
Yeah, couple say umbrella.
Ah,
Got a cockatiel in there.
cockatiel, yeah, good. It's not a cockatiel, but it's not a bad guess, cockatoo. So it's a baby cockatoo. This is like a little umbrella, but it's so cute. I hate not to show it. So you guys got the benefit of seeing a cute. They're cute as babies. They look like little dinosaurs. This one's actually a cuter face than when they are tiny, tiny. But all right, handling. So this is excuse me. This is we do this in front of the clients. Okay, it looks like you're choking them. We're going to talk about that in a second. Usually for this size bird, thumb and finger under the jaw, hold with 2 fingers, right? I'm not squeezing. We'll tell you why we can do this. Hold the feet in your hand on the front. Usually what I'm doing is holding the feet and the tips of the wings. The primary and secondaries, usually primaries, will hang out low enough. So you're going to be a little lower with this hand. Actually, could be a little bit lower if I was going to hold this bird. So hold the head and neck. I actually would slide this hand. So this was a motion picture that we called it second too soon. It needs to be down a little further to get feet and the tips of the wings. So if the feathers are cut, which is, we'll talk about that in a second, secure those wingtips with the feet. This is a little bit high, but hold. It's easier for these guys, especially if clients have to hold them for some reason, to use like a light towel. This would be a hand towel size for these little Quakers. All right, same picture. If you hold it like this, tell the clients you're going to hold it like this, so they know ahead of time, hey, I'm going to hold your bird by the neck more than I am by its body, but I'm not going to choke it. So I always tell my clients, if you push on your own trachea, you can collapse it. If you push on a bird's trachea, you just move it about. So it's hard to collapse a bird's trachea, even with effort. That doesn't mean to try. It just means I'm telling you, when you push and hold the neck, it'll move. It won't collapse. But they do breathe by expanding the chest and their ribs and raising that sternum. And so if you restrict this, so if you look at this right here, that's pushing my comfort right there, which is why this picture is still there. I would be down a little bit further, so I'm off of that chest. You can suffocate them by not allowing them normal movement of their chest, of their keel, their ribs, but you won't suffocate them by it looks like choking them. So I always tell clients ahead of time, because they always like, oh, you're choking them. I said, no, I'm going to hold them like this. It's all going to be good. And they usually relax for you. Wing trims, do we or don't we? So my go-to answer is we don't. So I prefer not to. I talk to the clients about it. I have a release if we do trim. There is not a wing trim for every bird. So it depends on which species bird it is, if they're little bullet birds like our cockatiels, or if they're an African gray or a bumblebee like an Amazon, which doesn't seem like it should fly at all. If you do the same wing trim, you're going to have a disaster on the heavy body, and you're not going to have the little ones not flying. I typically, if I'm going to do wing trim, it's really wing feather trim. I'm not really trimming the wings, wing feathers on these real heavy body birds, our big body. If I do anything, it'll be these little outside ones. I actually leave these N2 or 3, and I'll trim a few here. I try not to trim any. So my go-to is talk clients out of it. I don't do this cut over here at all anymore, but you'll still see it published. You'll also see, if you look, and I think the AAV has a paper on as well, there's a skinny trim where you're trimming just half off of the central vein on that feather down here. And it's a different kind of trim, takes a little bit longer, but it's another safe way to trim these guys to decrease their distance and their lift without having them crash. So ultimately, when I'm talking to clients about wing trims, if they say my bird is taken off the perch and it's getting 15 or 20 feet down the hallway and then it's on the ground, I wouldn't trim anymore, because anything beyond that, they can crash. Enough on wing trims. So flying is the best exercise. We know our challenge with flying is they fly potentially into mirrors or ceiling fans in our area of the country or out the door. So it's not without risk, but it is definitely with benefits. In the little parakeets, it's easy enough to get a big enough enclosure that they can fly in their enclosure. If it's too risky and the owners just insist on doing wing trim, I will do a conservative wing trim, and I'll tell them, look, give this bird some flight time, and if it needs a little more, I don't charge them to come back and trim a little bit more. It's a hassle probably for them to have to come back in again, but I can trim a little more. I just can't trim less. So each feather has about a 1-year life cycle. So that feather lives about a year. So if you trim it and it just molted in, it might be a year before it grows back. On the other hand, if you trim it and it's molting that next week, then in 8 weeks, it's going to be flighted. So you have to I tell the clients that every time, right? So it only takes 1 or 2 feathers to grow back to allow flight, especially on my little bullet birds, which are like I said, cockatiels, parakeets, Quakers, that same group. So I don't ever trim canaries. They're usually not out. But talk to them. This trim, don't tell them a wing trim is going to last a year. Tell them it's going to last until new feathers come in, and that can be up to a year or could be shorter. Pedicures, we do a lot of those. Be aware they do have a blood supply in that toenail, just like dogs and cats. I Dremel the bigger ones. I have a little hot wire for the smaller ones. Be aware that grinding those things, it will heat those nails up. So I'll do a little bit and then I'll back off and let it cool off. So I had a bird on a referral come to me that they dremeled all those toes and they just held that stone on there and all the toenails necrosed off. So that's an image that if you keep in your head, you will never heat those things up too much. So put it on there and then take it off. And I use a chainsaw sharpening stone, a pink one, but there's a bunch of things out there. Just realize the coarser it is, the faster you take the nail back and the more likely it is to bleed. But be careful when you grind those things. Quarantine. So this quarantine exam on all new birds is a great thing to say. I have some aviculturists that have so many birds, they get them in groups. They don't bring all their birds in for me to examine, but they will do an exam on all new birds. And the key is get their exam, know where that bird is, what its status is when it arrives at their doorstep. Infectious diseases are common. So remember, importation on our typical citizens has been off the table for quite some time, but they are still importing our softbills, our toucans, toucanettes. Some of our canaries will come in. There's still some birds that are still imported. But infectious diseases, so in this case, it's not always birds that are imported. It can be birds that are picked up at a pet store, still need to be quarantined, or picked up around here, we have flea markets that still sell birds. And so those have to always be quarantined as well. So all new birds quarantine. So infectious disease is common, beak and feather, Pacheco's, chlamydia. So we test chlamydia on all new birds that come to us. We recommend it. We can't make them test stuff because it's zoonotic. There's no perfect test for chlamydia. There's screening tests. So if the chlamydia test is negative and the white count is normal and the liver enzymes are normal, I'm going to tell the client there's no indication this bird currently has chlamydia, but it's still not a perfect collection. PDD, or proventricular dilatation disease, also now known as avian ganglioneuritis, caused by avian-borne virus. It seems to be almost ubiquitous. I am not currently testing every bird that comes in. I test those guys kind of as I have concerns, but that's another whole lecture. And a month from now, I might change my comments because we're doing more serology along with our PCRs. But be aware, stuff is always changing. Quarantine continues, separate airspace. So if you're bringing new birds, so if you have a collection, not you personally, but your clients typically, they want to get a new bird, needs to be a separate airspace, minimum of 30 days with an exam and testing. I like 45 days, but minimum of 30. Owners seem to be able to do a month, but a month and a half, they lose focus. Wash your hands between handling birds. Pretty much makes sense. You guys should all know that. Care for the quarantine birds last. Makes sense when I tell you, but what you want to do is the owners will have multiple birds. You want to take care of if they have babies first, then their adults, and then quarantine last. Ideally, they have a smock or something they can wear or change their clothes, but do the quarantine birds last, the ones that are new to the flock or the home. Dangers. Keep away from toxic plants. Sensitive Teflon, if you guys are not aware of it, overheated Teflon puts out a fume that is deadly to our birds. When I say deadly, it's deadly. So if your Teflon smokes, then your birds will die. It's just, there's no two ways about it. So I've seen whole groups of birds come in dead. So be aware. Lead and zinc. We see lead with birds that are out foraging around the house. They'll get lead weights, or sometimes people who reload guns will have lead weights in curtains, and then leaded glass has lead between stained glass. So that's why I'll see lead. Zinc, pretty common. Galvanization is pretty common. Some costume jewelry has zinc in it. So I probably see more zinc now than I do lead, but there's plenty of sources for it. So we take x-rays, we'll see metal, doesn't mean it's toxic. We'll do our metal screens and see if it's zinc or lead or other heavy metals. Don't leave birds unattended with other pets or children. You guys can think of all the horrible things that happen, right? So there's always bite wounds or crushing. Children, not that we don't love them, they don't always know how to handle birds successfully. Cat bites can be fatal. So what typically happens is like if a cat bite comes into us, I'm starting those guys an injectable. And if the bird is alive 72 hours later, then I feel comfortable it's going to be okay. But you can be super aggressive and still lose these little guys within 72 hours with a cat bite. New bird exams. So might be different depending on species or circumstances, right? There's some birds you're not going to want to grab up and look at, but we're talking pseudocines right now. We want to look at them. Physical exam, CBC, biochemical profile, PCRs. We talked about that. I typically do chlamydia, depending on the species, maybe beak and feather, virus. We talked about that. And then I usually look at stool samples. Although we don't see a lot of intestinal parasites in our pet birds, we do see it. And so it's kind of like, at least it's kind of like doing a heartworm test. You don't always see heartworms, but you still test. It depends on where you are in the country. We're in Texas, you get heartworms. Same with intestinal parasites. I always look. Gram stain in the stool. So I like doing gram stains to establish what the flora is. There's still some studies going on that compare actually gram stains. One of my associates is doing one that's comparing gram stains and moichur, which is AI, and culture and genetic DNA sequencing to see how they add up. But I still like doing gram stains of the stool. There we go. All right, sedation. Is it more or less risky? Right, so there's always an apprehension about sedating birds. There was a time when we would mask birds a long time ago. We don't ever do that anymore. So we always use an injectable sedation package on these guys. So if they're stressed or injured, is it good? So it might be. So it's plus or minus, means maybe sedation, maybe not. If they're injured, my sedation usually includes butorphanol, which is also an analgesic. The key is to keep these guys from being stressed or painful. So examinations, wing trims or nail trims or venipuncture, I rarely, if ever, sedate for that. So I can get that all done without sedation. X-rays, I will always sedate for if I want to have good positioning and everything how I want it. If I'm just going to stand a bird on a cassette, for example, I don't sedate for that. And the reason we do standing films is I have a bird that's not a good sedation risk. And oftentimes I may be looking for metallic densities, or if I'm looking for an egg, for example, I can't tell where it is in the bird, either metallic or egg, but I can tell if it's there or not. So I will sometimes not do full films because I don't want to sedate, but I never hesitate to sedate if I need to get films and I have a bird that's an adequate risk. Some people will sedate for microchipping. You see a little microchip right here. These are the little tiny microchips. They're mini microchips. Sounds like redundancy, but I don't typically sedate for that. Some people do. To me, you're injecting to sedate and they're injecting a microchip. So I just do the microchip injection. For birds over 100 grams, we microchip in the left breast muscle. If they're tinier than that, we'll do sub-Q dorsally between the kind of where we put our implants. Mini microchips. Look, I said it twice now. So I show you this vein, not because I want you to hit it. Venipuncture sites, this is not the vein to hit in our pseudocines. The best site for pseudocines, this bird you can see has no feathers, so it's not just the only problem, but it has such a good view of that basilic vein. So if you hit this vein in birds, it'll be a big old ginormous hematoma. So I never use this for sampling. Right jugular vein, because the left jugular vein is smaller. So we'll hit right jugular vein on our parrots. Pigeons, you can hit the basilic vein. Their jugular vein is amongst a huge venous plexus up in the neck. And so we don't hit their jugular vein. I probably hit median metatarsal the most on them. Same reason, basilic vein will get a hematoma. Waterfowl, median metatarsal vein, leg. It's a nice big one. And then your volume, no more than 1 cc per 100 grams of body weight. So 1% of the body weight. The good news is it only takes 0.2 cc's to run a profile and 0.05 cc's to run a CPC. So you're at 2.5 drops of blood to get a profile on the CPC. So we can do blood work on everything down to parrotlets, which are 23 grams or so. Parakeets, 30 grams per EC. There was a time when people would do nail trimming. So if you ever get the urge to do a nail trim sample, to do CBC or biochemistries, work through that urge and don't do that because you won't get accurate results. Some pet stores and some aviculturists will use a nail trim, which seems painful to me, to get enough blood to do DNA sexing, but that's still not my favorite, so I don't do that. Hurts. Examination and record keeping. So head to toe exam like you do dogs and cats. First thing you do, they're in an exam room, don't touch them. Look at them, see how they're breathing, see if they're vocalizing, see how they sit on the perch, how they move around. Big portion of the exam on birds is observational. What are they doing? Because you want them to be back that same spot when they get done being examined, but you also want to be sure that you don't pull them out when they're so sick you're going to cause harm when you take a look at them. So respiratory rate when they're perching. So when you pull them out, your crop's on the right hand side of the neck at the thoracic inlet. I don't know if you guys can see me, but I can demo that for you. It's free. Heart rate. You can get a heart rate on some of these guys. Beak, ear, eyes, nose, and throat. So in the mouth, I'm always looking for changes in the choanal slit. Older birds, they get squamous cell carcinomas. Younger birds get, actually all birds can get infections, vitamin A deficiency. So all sorts of stuff happen inside the mouth. So take a good look inside there at the choanal slit, and you can actually see the tracheal opening on citizens. Feather quality, right, and quantity if they have feather destructive behavior. Look at the skin, the vent, uropygial gland. I'll show you what that is if you don't know. I'll show you what that is in a moment. And then we look at their musculature. So when I first pull these guys out, in fairness, I have them out. I'm trying to feel how thick, what their weight is. Because if they're super skinny, my exam's going to be 10 seconds. If their weight is normal and they're not stressing, I can have a 2-minute exam. So wings, legs, patagium, which means you stretch out both of these wings all the way to the end. Make sure they have normal range of motion. Same with the legs, normal range of motion. The coelom, which is the thoracic and abdominal cavity, is everything inside the chestnut bird. That's the coelomic cavity. And then look at their stool. They almost always will donate some stool for you. So in the bottom of the cage, there's always a little gift there you can look at. When I say green urates, so urates are the white portion. The urine is clear. The stool is a number of different colors, but the urates themselves are like a lime green that can indicate liver disease. We see it with psittacosis a lot, which causes really big livers, but any liver disease can cause that color change. Quick anatomy, your patagium is right here. That's that little band that runs between the wrist and the shoulder. Your vent is down here where they go to the bathroom, crop right-hand side. Uropygial gland is not in all birds, but it sits right above the tail base, and that's a great place for squamous cell carcinomas in your older birds. Gizzard is a ventriculus. You guys already know that part. Then an inguinal region is probably the easiest and safest place to do sub-Q fluids. Sub-Q fluids, you have to be very thin on your injection. The bird sizeometer, so this is what is published. This is what I say. If they're very thin, I call them lean. If they're thin, I'll call them flight weight. So this is normal flight weight for citizen. They tend to be a little bit less than beefy. Ideal body weight. So if I have the reason I say that, if I have a bird that's in a flight, I expect it to be number 2. I expect it to be that weight normally. So I'll call that flight weight. Ideal weight for my citizens are going to be a little bit more of a little round. If they're overweight, we like to call them overconditioned because we try not to hurt our clients' feelings. It's a little overconditioned. And then if they're obese, we'll say that they're robust or they need to be taller, one of the two. We'll sometimes say obese, but clients like it better when you say they're robust. At least you can get some humor out of it. They're like, are you saying he's robust like he's fat? Well, yes. It's a story. Remember, there's difference in species, right? If you feel a chicken, it's going to be like almost like number 1 every time, normal. They feel way thinner than your citizens do. I'm going to run through this a little faster. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to move a little quicker. Heartbeats, 250 to 600 beats per minute for small birds. It is possible to count that. Respiratory rate, 20 to 75. Temperature, we don't take temperatures on these guys routinely. 103 to 106 is normal cloacal temperature on our parrots. We don't ever take it. So rates can be higher with stress, just like our dogs and cats. And then it is super important to note recovery time. So this bird should be back to normal observational respiratory rate within 3 to 4 minutes of handling. If it's longer than that, that bird probably has a problem. Either it's way, way out of shape, which is usually not the issue. The issue is usually something's wrong with that bird. 3 to 4 minutes. Is it important to know gender? Yep. So I put down here, most birds are not genetically dimorphic to us because birds have a wider range of visual receptors And so they can see stuff we don't. And so these two sets might look totally different to themselves than they do to us. So that's important to recognize. DNA is one way to do it, which is blood sample. Endoscopy, which is checking looking inside. Egg production, kind of obvious. But it does impact your behavior and your medical considerations. So, if I have a sick bird and I don't know what gender it is, I have to include egg binding or egg disease or reproductive disease every single time. Some behaviors may be a clue to gender, like this one says late again, this better be good. So we can guess which gender they are. So sometimes behaviors do help us. 5 minutes. Okay, guys, here we go. Flock animals. Remember the security numbers. If you think about these guys, they're in flocks, most of the species that we deal with. And so they only have to manage a small segment for observation for safety. And when we're their entire flock and we leave, then they have 360-degree watch at that point. So think about the stress level on these guys when their flock is gone. That's part of thinking like what the bird sees. That's why the very first cartoon was that way. Enrichment is critical. Branches, toys, things to chew on. Critical. Exercise, socialization, also critical. Foraging. There was a great study on African greys where they had country-free loading, all the food they wanted, and they had African greys had to work to get the food, and they all chose to work for it, and that's foraging. And there's a number of ideas on how to help these guys, either hiding food or puzzle toys that help with foraging. And then behavior, respond to only behaviors you like, and don't ignore those you don't. Number one complaint, my bird is screaming. I ask the client, what do you do? Well, I scream at them and tell them to shut up. And I'm like, well, your bird loves when you do that. And so now they have inadvertently trained their bird to scream. And it's a cockatoo. He screams, I scream at him. Excellent. And the birds love it. And then address behavior problems immediately. All right, we're going to fly through regulations. I'll give you guys a minute. This is Quaker parrots. Some endangered species has special permits across state lines. There's more and more occurring now. Oh, there we go. This gives us a few minutes. So this is, everyone should see Quaker babies here sometime. They all look like they have cerebral palsy. All right, what's wrong with this picture? Last question of the day. What's wrong with this picture? You have 15 seconds to answer. What is wrong with this picture? See how fast people are. This is a true case. We'll talk about that here real quick too. All right. I know you guys are all students. You should be typing fast. What do you have for me?
Looks like a wire floor upside down, not enough space, no perch.
Yeah. Toys are too close is an option, right? Those are all good ones. Good ones. All right. Here we go. It's all about perspective. Yeah, this bird's upside down. So the story on this bird is not upside down because it wants to be upside down. It's upside down because it has a cloacal papilloma. And so when it stood up on the perch, it would bleed, it hurt. So the client, so about 2 years it did this, it was upside down. The client got it from someone else and brought it to us. And when we managed the cloacal papilloma, it sat on a perch. But it looked so, I took the picture and I picked it up at one time, it was upside down. And I went, he looked so comfortable. And he was when he actually stood on his perch. But that was 2 years he hung on the top of it. He hung upside down because it hurt to stand. There you go. Where's live by? If you can't be kind, at least be vague. Oh, another one of my favorite animations. There's my clinic in Texas when it snowed. That's the other time it snowed. It's probably been twice now. That's my clinic down in Sugar Land. Thank you much. It's open to questions if you guys.